Welcome to the Cathedral Church of St. Marie and this guide to the memorials to St. Joseph. This guide was created to mark the year of St. Joseph, announced by Pope Francis in autumn 2020. The year commemorated the 150th anniversary of St. Joseph being named the patron saint of the Universal Church by Pope Pius IX, and the 65th anniversary of the creation of the feast of St. Joseph the Worker by Pope Pius XII. The two celebrations acknowledge St. Joseph as the silent saint who was given the noble task of caring and watching over the Virgin Mary and Jesus, and who now cares for and watches over the Church, and models for all the dignity of human work. As befits a cathedral dedicated to the Virgin Mary, St. Marie's includes a number of representations or references to her spouse in its decoration, 16 in all. 2 show him as an artisan. Joseph is often thought of as a carpenter, but a more accurate translation might be craftsman. We start our tour of St. Marie's tributes to the role St. Joseph played in protecting and nurturing Jesus in the south transept. The main window in the south transept depicts 4 saints. These are, from left to right, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Anna, who was the mother of the Virgin Mary, St. Anna's husband, St. Joachim, and finally St. Joseph the Worker, who is shown holding a set square. The window was installed in time for the opening of the church in 1850 and was donated by Teresa Wright of Revel Grange, who is depicted kneeling at St. Teresa's feet. The Revels were the most influential family in the township of Stannington, which is now part of Sheffield. The earliest reference to the family can be found in the Sheffield Court Roll of 1287. The Revels were persecuted for maintaining their Catholic faith and practices following Henry VIII's break with Rome in the 16th century, which launched the Reformation. In 1632, the head of the family, Rowland Revel, was forced to pay a twice-yearly fine of 30 shillings, or £76,000 in today's money, because of the family holding to the Catholic faith. Rowland went on to fight on the side of King Charles I during the English Civil War. In 1644, he was taken prisoner by Edward Montague, the second Earl of Manchester, who was, initially, Oliver Cromwell's superior. By 1744, the last male Revel, Thomas Revel, had died. The Grange was occupied by Thomas's daughter Anne and her husband Richard Broomhead, who came from another prominent local Catholic family. The Grange passed to their eldest son, and then, in 1841, to their youngest child, Teresa, and her husband, Francis Wright. This was the Teresa Wright who donated the south transept window. The staircase to the left of the south transept leads to St. Marie's Lady Chapel, also known as the Munster Chapel, after Henry Munster, who contributed to its creation. The staircase contains 2 stained glass windows designed by John Francis Bentley, who lived from 1839 to 1902. Bentley also designed the wooden casing for the organ in St. Marie's Sanctuary, and went on to design Westminster Cathedral in London. The window on the right shows the Annunciation, and is dedicated to the memory of Carolina Bernasconi, who died aged 16 in 1879. The second window is a depiction of St. Joseph, erected in memory of Charles Raimondi and his wife Constance. The Bernasconis and the Raimondis were Swiss Catholic immigrants who established successful businesses in Yorkshire. Louis Bernasconi and his wife Martha arrived in Sheffield from the small Swiss town of Mendrisio, close to the Italian border and the lake and city of Como, in around 1820. They ran an opticians, cutlery and hardware business in Waingate. The Raimondis arrived in Halifax around 1837 and set up as jewellers, silversmiths and makers of watches, clocks and chronometers. In 1857, the Raimondis' eldest child, 25-year-old Savina, married Louis Bernasconi's brother, Henry. The Annunciation window is a tribute to their third child, and Charles and Constance's granddaughter, Carolina. Charles and Constance lived in Halifax until they moved to Sheffield with their teenage daughters Rosa Maria and Emily Angelina, not long before Charles's death in 1861. 6 years later, Emily Angelina married Charles Hadfield, son of St. Marie's architect Matthew Ellison Hadfield. Charles designed several features of the cathedral his father built. Rosa Maria continued to live in the city until her death in 1936 at the age of 94. We now move to the St. Joseph Chapel, which is also known as the Norfolk Chapel because it is the Dukes of Norfolk's family chapel. The Dukes of Norfolk are descended from Edward I and maintained their Catholic faith during and after the Reformation, whilst also covertly supporting their fellow Catholics. The Dukes of Norfolk are the premier dukes and earls in the English peerage, as well as being Earl Marshal and Hereditary Marshal of England. The Norfolk family has been by far the major contributor to the construction and latterly the restoration of the Cathedral Church of St. Marie. The tiled floor bears the initials of the Norfolk family, surmounted by a ducal coronet and the initials of the Earl of Arundel and Surrey, with the lion of the house and the motto Sola Virtus Invicta, virtue alone is victorious. The chapel contains 3 representations of Joseph. 2 are in the reredos, which is the name for the ornamental screen at the back of the altar. The carving at the top shows Joseph on his deathbed with Christ poised to welcome him into heaven. Panels on either side show the archangels Michael and Gabriel. Michael is sheathing his sword, symbolizing the completion of his task of guarding Joseph from danger in life, while Gabriel holds a finger to his lips, a reference to the strength of Joseph's faith. The central figure beneath the deathbed scene is St. Joseph holding a lily, a traditional symbol of purity and rebirth, which may also be used to signify virginity. The altar bears words from Psalm 42, Introibo ad altare Dei, I will go to the altar of God, the opening words of the Mass in Latin as it was celebrated in the 1800s. The reredos dates back to 1877 and was designed by Charles Hadfield, the husband of Emily Raimondi, who we mentioned earlier. It was reputedly sculpted by Theodore John Baptiste Pfeifers. Pfeifers was born in Belgium around 1820 and was recruited by Augustus Pugin, the English architect, designer, artist and critic, to work on the Pugin-designed Houses of Parliament in London. Pfeiffer's worked on several projects with Matthew and Charles Hadfield and John Francis Bentley, the designer of the windows we saw on the stairs to the Lady Chapel. He carved the original high altar and reredos in St. Marie's sanctuary to Pugin's designs. The stone screen separating the chapel from the sanctuary has a request in Latin for prayers for the House of Norfolk along the top, with tiling commemorating the work in Sheffield of the Sisters of Notre Dame at its base. The tiling to the right shows Joseph holding a lily, the Virgin Mary, and, on the altar behind them, the Agnus Dei, or Lamb of God, a representation of Jesus who, by sacrificing his life on the cross, saves mankind from sin and death. The image also evokes the idea of God shepherding his flock and, as is traditional, shows the lamb with a pennant bearing a red cross on a white background, resting on one shoulder and held by the lamb's cocked foreleg. The cross predates the cross of St. George. It was St. George who became associated with the cross, and not the other way round. The tiling to the left shows 7 saints, 6 of whom are also represented in the tiling on the right-hand wall of the chapel: Saints Agnes, Barbara, Catherine, Clare, Elizabeth and Margaret. The chapel also contains statues representing Saints Rose of Lima and Margaret on the right-hand wall. As you turn to leave the chapel, you will find statues of St. Winifred and St. Hilda of Whitby. St. Hilda, on the left as you face the exit to the chapel, holds the remains of a shepherd's crook, her staff of office, as the head of an abbey, and a building, indicating that she founded the abbey at Whitby. Look carefully at the column supporting the statue, and you will see the fossil of an ammonite, a prehistoric sea snail, embedded in the stone. Many ammonite fossils have been found in Whitby, and legend has it that they are the remains of a plague of snakes turned to stone in a miracle performed by St. Hilda. The sanctuary contains the most representations of St. Joseph in any one part of the cathedral, 8 in all. Most are in the great east window, which tells the story of the life of the Virgin Mary from her birth to her assumption into heaven. The window was donated to the cathedral by its architect, Matthew Ellison Hadfield. You can see Hadfield's image and that of his wife Sarah at prayer below the central representation of the Virgin. The window was designed by George Goldie, who trained as an architect with Hadfield at the suggestion of Augustus Pugin, who we encountered in the St. Joseph Chapel. Goldie worked with Hadfield for more than 20 years in Sheffield and London, before establishing his own practice in London. In 1877, Pope Pius IX awarded him the Cross and Order of St. Sylvester for his work as a Catholic architect. The window was made by William Wales, whose firm also made windows for Chichester and Gloucester cathedrals. The great east window is red from top to bottom and left to right. Joseph makes his first appearance at the top of the second column, which shows his betrothal to the Virgin Mary. In biblical times, betrothal preceded marriage, and the bride would continue to live at her father's house until the second ceremony, when she would be brought to the groom's house and the marriage would be consummated. Joseph's next appearance is in 3 consecutive panels in the third column, taken from events in the story of Christmas. In the top panel, he appears as Joseph the worker carrying the set square of a craftsman at Jesus' birth. The next panel down shows the Epiphany, the appearance of Christ to the Gentiles, that is, people who are not Jewish. In this case, the Gentiles are the wise men or magi, who followed a star to the place of Christ's birth in a stable in Bethlehem, and brought him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The third panel shows the presentation at the temple, where Joseph holds a basket containing an offering of 2 doves, which was required under Jewish law as thanksgiving for a firstborn son. Joseph's final appearance in the east window is in the 2 panels at the top of the 5th column. The topmost panel shows the flight into Egypt, when the Holy Family became refugees to escape Herod the Great, king of Judea. Herod believed Jesus had been born to supplant him, and had ordered all male children aged 2 years old and under to be killed in an attempt to kill Jesus. The second panel tells a story from later in Jesus' childhood. Mary and Joseph had taken Jesus to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast of the Passover, which marks the Israelites' escape from slavery in Egypt and is one of the most important feasts in the Jewish religious calendar. As they were returning to Nazareth from Jerusalem, Mary and Joseph found Jesus was missing. They turned back to Jerusalem in a bid to find him. Arriving back in the capital, they discovered Jesus was still in the temple, discussing the Jewish faith as an equal with the teachers of the faith. Immediately below the east window and against the wall is the sanctuary reredos, designed by Augustus Pugin and carved by Theodore Pfeiffers. In front of that stands a structure called a retab, which was part of a memorial high altar installed in 1921 to commemorate the 68 men of the parish who died in the First World War. The altar was removed in the 1970s, but the retable remains and contains 4 painted alabaster panels representing the cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Joseph appears in the first and last of these 4 panels. The first panel is another representation of the betrothal of Mary and Joseph and portrays prudence, exemplified by doing the will of God. Mary did God's will by giving birth to Jesus, and Joseph did the same by accepting Mary as his wife and Jesus as his son. The last panel in the sequence represents temperance, exemplified in the life of the Holy Family in Nazareth. Mary is shown with a skein of flax, while the child Jesus is helping Joseph by carrying 2 pieces of wood on his shoulder. The wood is in a cross shape, foreshadowing Jesus' death on the cross. The cathedral boasts 2 statues of St. Joseph. The one in the north aisle was presented by Dr. Allenson in memory of his wife, who died in 1860, aged 25. The other is a painted statue which initially stood at the entrance to the St. Joseph Chapel. This statue was moved to a niche on the exterior of the cathedral close to the south door during the reordering of the cathedral in the 1970s. The statue was brought back inside the cathedral to prevent it suffering further weather damage when St. Mary's underwent major renovation in 2012. It is currently in storage awaiting restoration when funds permit. We have now reached the end of our tour of the memorials to St. Joseph in the Cathedral Church of St. Marie. We hope you've enjoyed your tour and would invite you to look at other video guides and audio guides on the St. Marie's website.